Dr. Kala, in between, still talking about data, let's go deep into one of the key economic indicators, talking about jobs, tracking just how many jobs are being created in the economy, perhaps on a monthly basis. But the MBS did conduct a first quarter job creation survey in collaboration with the National Planning Commission, the Central Bank of Nigeria, and the Office of the Chief Economic Advisor to the President. Now, that survey was to cover about 36 states, including the Federal Capital Territory. How did that go? Because I know you did send out some field officers. You reached out to some establishments to fill out some questionnaires. And you did say actually that there's a law in the MBS Act that actually empowers you to sanction any establishment that refuses to provide needed information for the MBS.
Well, yes, that particular exercise was actually the Economic Management Implementation Team chaired by the Coordinating Ministry of the Economy, taking the government's seriousness in terms of job creation into account, actually asked us to work on this survey. The work was meant to have gone on between the first and second quarter. I have to emphasize that statistics, getting data, particularly in a developing country, costs a lot of money. Even in advanced countries where they do surveys cost a whole lot of money. And as long as there's no funding for this exercise, it becomes very difficult. Even, like I said, in developing countries where they have access to electronic means of getting data, the ICT system is a lot more developed, they have problems. Now, gathering data in Nigeria, raw data, particularly when you have to go to households, you have to go to establishments. You cannot ask someone living in a rural area to send information via the internet, because obviously he doesn't have access to the internet or to ICT facilities. Even if he did, he might not understand the questions properly. So our officers have to actually go across to all these individuals across the country. Sometimes they sit on boats, particularly in the south-south region, for hours just to cross certain rivers, just to get to where households are. So this costs a lot of money. And as far as the job creation survey is concerned, the work had been finalized as far as the National Bureau of Statistics. We are having challenges getting the funding to actually start the field work, and that is basically why that has not been completed as at yet. Once we get the funding for the work, we are ready to start the work. But unfortunately, because of funding challenges, we have not been able to do anything about that. We're just still waiting on that. As far as the law, yes, the Statistics Act actually empowers us to sanction households and individuals. That is correct. I also have to stress that any information we collect, we are also bound by that same law not to use it for example, you cannot release the information, your private information, to anybody else. It has to be kept in secret and used only for general planning purposes. So and if we use it for any other objective, the institution can actually take the MBS to court. So it's a two-way process whereby we can sanction you for refusing to give us data, but if we use the information you give us for anything else apart from planning and evidence-based policy, that institution can also take us to court for misusing the information, which is confidential. So it's something that I think the public is not fully realized, that we are also bound by that same law to treat their information in confidence.
Now, Dr. Kala, we have actually established how important having timely, accurate statistics or data from the MBS is, especially to the federal government. It helped to help the government to plan. I mean, if you can measure it, or if you can't measure it, as some people say, you can't plan for it. So, on the issue of funding, you talked about the fact that you have field officers going to rural areas. Sometimes they can't get to some of them get to their destinations, but you probably would need more in terms of manpower. You talked about the issue of funding, on the funding as it were. Now, being a very vital tool for the government in terms of policy making, what do you make of the fact that you're still having problems with funding? I mean, if you're that important, if the MBS is that important to the government, should the issue of funding arise?
Well, I have to take into consideration that Nigeria, as a developing country, has several issues the government is trying to tackle. There's competing needs for resources. And you have to understand that, for example, building a road is something that the people can see. Giving money for statistics is something that the people cannot see. So if you're going to take a decision between allocating resources to things that the people can identify with straight away, then they can see that several number of roads have been built. It's a lot easier to explain what happened with that money than to say money was done for something, an exercise that is largely unseen, like data gathering, despite the fact that it's important. But I have to stress, actually, that this current administration has been completely data friendly. The funding for the MBS, though still inadequate, has been improving, particularly with this current administration, actually improved significantly. That being said, I'm not suggesting that we're anywhere close to the kind of resources we require to do our work properly, but I've seen that there's a lot of commitment coming from the Minister of National Planning, the Ministry of Finance. We are getting the budget office that is very sympathetic, that will be trying to improve the funding for MBS, and I promise that support going forward. So I think I am lucky because I think I have a data-friendly administration. The Minister of Finance, coordinating Minister of the Economy, is a World Bank official. She knows the importance of data. The Director General Budget Office is from the IMF. You understand the importance of data. The Chief Economic Advisor, the President for the world. These are people that, with their backgrounds, experience, they understand how important data is, and because of that, they have been given significant support. The National Planning Minister, that is our supervisory ministry, is the former Deputy Governor of the CBN. He was the former Minister of Finance, so he understands how important data is. So we've gotten tremendous support recently from our government, but like I said, it's a gradual process. We still don't have enough money to carry out all the data gathering exercise that we have to do. But I am encouraged by the fact that it's clearly improving, and the body language from the government is that it will improve going forward. So we're just keeping our fingers crossed and hoping that gradually, with my strategy is take whatever little amount I have, make the best of it, and using that as a basis to ask for better funding, rather than sitting down complaining that the funding is not enough and doing nothing. So with whatever little funding we are having, we are releasing as much data as we can, making it as timely and as credible as possible, while at the same time asking for more funding so we can generate even more data. I think that's a better approach than just sitting back down, complaining that the money is not enough.
Dr. Kale, do you also think that perhaps the MBS has a perception problem? Because you talk to an average person or somebody who knows or has some significant knowledge of economic issues, and some analysts, they will tell you that they will still insist that data is not robust, is not reliable. Do you think that perhaps in terms of awareness, maybe the MBS, that's an area the MBS could do more in terms of letting the public, enlightening the public about the fact that we actually do have reliable data, as you say, available online at the MBS website?
Well, I know I mentioned earlier that statistics is always controversial, and I mentioned earlier that yes, a perception problem. Over the years, MBS data has not been perceived as reliable. This was very inefficient. The processes were very cumbersome. People have noticed that it takes a while for people to realize that there are changes in the organization, things are improving. Even in terms of interpretation of the data, sometimes people basically don't. I'll give an example with the inflation numbers. Some people always assume that inflation is basically Lagos and maybe Abuja. But then if you as an analyst go to Lagos and you see the price of some commodity has risen by 50% or by 100%, and then in a rural area in the north, in that market, it has really risen by just 50%. The average of those two markets is 75%. So assuming these two markets are the only markets in the country, MBS would release that inflation in the country is 75%. But you that go to the Lagos market and see prices have gone up by 100%, you will say, oh, this is not correct. It doesn't reflect what is going on the ground. And that's because you are assuming that Lagos state mirrors the entire country. Now, when you are getting inflation data across the country, if you focus only on one location, it's an average of all the prices across the entire country. And of course, when you're having an average, if you go to Lagos will say the unemployment rate, the inflation numbers are too low. Are too low. But if you go to this another market where it was 50%, they will say it's too high. But the truth is, when you now find the average for the country, it comes to 75. So people have to understand, and of course, what will happen is that these numbers are not credible. But that's because you are looking at it in terms of the area